Hi everyone. Hello everyone, and welcome to our meetup, Data Visualization Zurich, number 15. Thank you, all of you, for joining us tonight. My name is Luc Guillemot. I'm an interaction engineer at Interactive Things here in Zurich, Switzerland. And I co-organized this meetup with Benjamin Wiederkehr. We organized this meetup in Zurich to provide a space to share and advance the knowledge in our local community, to meet our local community. And since the pandemic, we do it online, of course, like everybody else. And this allows us to invite speakers from all over the world. And this is the case for tonight. We have two speakers, Gabrielle Mérite and Sonja Kuijpers. And Gabrielle works as a freelance data visualization designer, and she's with us all the way from Los Angeles. And Sonja Kuijpers designs data visualization and infographics with her studio Turp in the Netherlands. The topic for our meetup tonight is creating empathy with data visualization. I'm very happy that we tackle this topic because I think it's a topic that is often overlooked in the world of data visualization. And also in our meetups, I think we tackled a lot of problems around data visualization as a graphic system, as a semiology that must follow rules and design guidelines. For instance, our previous meetup was the implementation of a visualization language in VegaLite. And the one before was about creating visualization that follow design guidelines from a brand, from a corporate brand. So I'm very happy that tonight we take a slightly different approach, which is empathy. And I think empathy goes both ways, like how to trigger empathy through data visualization using, for instance, design that appeals more to the emotional side of our brains. And on the other side, how the empathy that we have towards a topic or a data set can influence the data design and create new types of visualizations. And I think both our speakers tonight have done brilliant work in this domain. I highly recommend Gabrielle's Instagram account with many very beautiful pieces, and also highly recommend Sonja's portfolio on her studio's website, and especially the piece called A View on Despair that I think you will talk a little bit about later, Sonja. So about the agenda for tonight, we will have so for 20 minutes with you, Gabrielle, and then 20 minutes with you, Sonja, and which will leave us about 20 minutes for questions and answers at the end. So about asking questions, there is a button below the video feed, ask a question. So you can press it and ask a question anytime during the presentation, and we will also reserve some time in the end to answer those questions. You can also don't hesitate to share anything in the chat. So that's it for the introduction. And now, Gabrielle, I leave the stage to you.
All right, let me share my screen. Is it working?
It is working, yes.
Perfect. All right, let me put a keynote. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, now we can see full screen presentation.
All right, perfect. So hi. Hi, everyone. Well, thank you, Luc, a lot again for inviting me and organizing this little meetup and also interactive things, obviously. And so today we're about to talk about creating empathy with data visualization, and I'm going to tweak the title a little bit. Sorry, Luc. But I'm going to talk a bit more about how to provoke emotions with data visualization. And you're going to ask me why. Why is it necessary to create anything like data visualization that's just supposed to inform and it's not supposed to create emotion? And I think I'm going to tell you a little bit of story, and maybe that's going to explain why I feel like there might be a need for it. Just an example. So I came in LA in 2015 for a job opportunity, and I had in mind this image of LA, which is palm trees, the beach, the sun, heat, hippies, obviously with long hair, different, some kind of a melting pot, or also maybe, the Hollywood stars and the glamorous aspect of it, the parties, cocaine, fun stuff. And this is kind of what LA is, to be completely honest. It's not completely wrong. It's full of cliche, but it's if you've been here, it's similar to what actually happens. But there's a side of LA that is not often displayed in shows, in tourism, which is this side. And this was a photo that I took yesterday. I went for coffee, and when I go on the coffee, down my street, there's this encampment of homeless people in the street. And it's literally just down my street. And if you've been in LA and you've actually walked in LA, you notice that there's some places in the city that you cannot even walk because there's so many homeless. And when I arrived here, I was kind of surprised because it's not what I've been sold, when I came here. And so I looked it up, and I was kind of curious on like what happened, why is there so many homeless people here, what happens in the city. And it's actually a well-covered issue. It's covered a lot, mostly by local newspaper, and the LA Times does a great job at it. Because over the years, the homeless population in Los Angeles has exploded in the city and in the county. And especially with coronavirus right now, it's probably, up to the roof. And living here, I can actually tell you that those numbers are probably underestimated. And the charts, they're beautifully made. They have great title. They're super informative. They're highly legible. And I got all the information I was looking for, right? Like by the book, it's a perfect chart. But the thing that was, to me, was there was this massive gap between these charts and the reality that I was seeing in the street and the emotion that was provoking in me seeing those tents. And so I've asked myself, as an information designer, what's the goal of all those data? So usually you collect the data, you analyze the data, you visualize it, and then the end goal is to inform. So what happens when you inform somebody and people don't care, are not interested? And is that really the goal? If you're like me, you're looking for it. Like, what happens? Does that really reflect reality? And I've been thinking of, let's say that this year I've been trying to find another goal, or maybe more an additional goal, I would say, because not only to inform, but can we create dataviz that instead of just informing are also, creating a reaction like anger, maybe sadness, happiness, or maybe just like push people to somehow take action. And so how do you create dataviz that makes you feel? And honestly, it's a tough one. Like, I've personally struggled, and it's an exploration, and I'm just going to show you some ideas that I found out during my exploration. So if you know me, I was born in the 90s, so that makes me what we call with horror a millennial. And what I wanted to know what people relate to. So I went online and I looked up the most popular, social media, Instagram or Twitter posts. And what I found out is that you can see those images are like the most popular one across the several social media platforms. And what I found out is that they have something in common. They're not a chart to start with. They're not computer generated. They display real people in real life events. And so even like death, for instance, with this image of Kobe, or friendship, or the birth of a child, or, just taking drunk selfies at a party. And this together, they're not staged, and they allow people to somehow, people seem to somehow, see the world through those people's eyes and see what they see, feel what they feel, and like relate to them. And this is actually what I wanted to do with my dataviz, is to actually make people relate to these numbers. And so how do you do that? Well, how do you do a chart that's not a chart? I call it the ceci n'est pas une pipe. So this is not a pipe technique. And how do you do a chart that doesn't look like a chart and make people react to it? And the first step I take when I do my work is to look for inspiration. And because I don't want to do a chart, I'm not going to look inspiration for a chart. And so all my inspiration come from different type of art. For instance, generative art, patterns that found in nature that you can see here at the bottom. It could be paintings, it could be collage, it could be photography. And what I'm looking for when I'm looking at this inspiration, it's not just the aesthetic, but more the emotion that comes from those pieces. And what I try to do in my work is try to reproduce those, use this emotion and analyze why they provoke those emotions and try to replicate this in data visualization. So I'm going to show you a few examples of that I used as inspiration and how they ended up in the database pieces. So so I don't even know quite often where those pieces come from, but this actually, I think, was originally a plan for a cathedral, if I'm getting this right. And you can actually distinguish some kind of, it was a plan, there's, traces of line, it looked like it was some kind of geometric, but somehow someone took away some pixel and blurred it out. And even though you can distinguish the system that was there in the first place, it somehow took away the main meaning of it. And this was the main inspiration for this chart. So I guess most of us are not from the US. So in the US this year, it was the 2020 census, meaning we're asking people to fill up a form that allows the government to count people, but also to get more information about their ethnicity, their income, how many people in the households, stuff, information like this. And then this year, the Urban Institute estimated that Black people of America could be undercounted by as much as almost 4%. And you would tell me that 4% is nothing. And if I had drawn a pie chart, it would be really, really small. But if you take 4% away of the big picture of what America is, it completely removes the meaning of the people, really. And I use this inspiration of missing pixel and blurring the chart to show how removing 4% completely changed the structure of it. And that's what happened, because if we miss 4% in the census, it changes completely the political representation, the funding that is dedicated to certain communities, and it has a lot of implication to the daily life of those people. Another inspiration would be this specific painting. It's actually photography. And this painting, for me, you can look, it's a landscape, and you sort of are able to identify what the picture was originally, but it shows an evolution in time. And also what it shows is some kind of an uncertainty. And to me, it's important because I also think that often we present chart as cold hard fact and the truth and some kind of authority, when really we all know that it's a bit twisted, it's somehow biased, it's somewhat incomplete sometimes, or imperfect. And honestly, in COVID right now, we all know that it's often incomplete. And so I use the same idea of evolution and uncertainty to display the waiting time for COVID diagnosis take across the US. And the idea, as you can see here, is that you take a test and then you wait for specific you wait for a certain amount of time that you receive your result. And as you can see here, at first 100% of people are waiting. After 2 days, there's only 63%. And after 4 days, there's still 30% that still have not received the result. And it's it could have been a light chart if you ask me. But the idea of being able to bleed to, kind of like bleed from that first day, and the idea of wait, but also uncertainty in the numbers, allows me to kind of show you a more honest view on this subject, maybe, and maybe something more graspable. So that's for inspiration. But when it comes to database, after taking inspiration, I always think about my subject, like what emotion do I want people to have when looking at it, and I use what's called as what is named sensory disruption. And sensory disruption is the idea of using the human senses and trigger them. But you're going to tell me, visually, there's only one that we can do, which is sight. But with sight, you can actually trigger a lot of emotion and a lot of senses. For instance, here on this picture, as you can see, because of the texture of the picture, you can tell it's raining. You can probably imagine the humidity of the atmosphere and like the wetness. You can also see some kind of like the blonde background, the colors, that's a mood. And you can guess that's probably, let's say, a car driving in the countryside because of the green of the trees. And it might be the evening because it's a bit dark. And so this idea for me of like setting this mood with color and texture, it's because I want to take the cold hard facts and make them feel more warm and more living. And this using those texture allow me to make this link between the real world and the subject of my database. So just a quick example. This is a graph that I took from a report on carbon emission, greenhouse gas emissions, actually. And this is the top 100 fossil fuel producer. And so it's just a classic graph, right? With just, bars and colors. And what I wanted to do is showing people how like insidious the gas is. And so I took this graph and then I made it more, I wanted to show more uncertainty. So obviously I created more line because to me, it shows it as like a bigger portion of greenhouse gases produced. And after that, it still felt somehow too happy, like the colors are too happy, or maybe looks like a fire. It doesn't feel like gas and sadness. And this is the emotion that I really wanted people to feel like. And so I changed the color palette to a more darker and toned down and less saturated. And you can feel the atmosphere changing already. And what's really important to me also is to use typography. And I know we talk about typography in DataViz as more of a tool, and we always talk about legibility mostly. But I think typography also have a sense of a feeling and a mood that comes with them. And I use it across my work, and you'll be able to see it in other pieces. But I really think it's important for me, for instance, choosing this balance between the very like hard, maybe computer generated, which is what we, of the graph, and then also this more like serif fonts that's more harsh and cutting, a bit like climate change feels like, to be honest, these days. And finally, what was really important to me is to display the idea of smoke. And you cannot physically touch the smoke, but if you see smoke, and everybody have seen some fumes, you can see it kind of like raise in the air, and it's, it's noxious, it's insidious, and I wanted people to feel, looking at the visual, have this feeling of oppressiveness and asphyxiation almost. So I took my Photoshop brushes, to be honest, to kind of blur the edges. And again, it takes away from the accuracy of the graph. But to be completely honest, the goal here is to inform people on one single reality, which is 71% of global industrial greenhouses, can be linked to 100 fossil fuel producers, and that's it. And that's also why I added this little person on a bike to show the scale of how much gigatons of carbon dioxide is produced by those companies compared to you on your bike trying to save the environment by not taking your car today. And it's very important for me to also show these ideas on top of the numbers itself. Another technique that I use is the technique of, outside of texture, is using photography. And here you can see this is a perfume called No. 5 Channel, and my mom has this perfect and has been wearing it for years. So when she wears it and I smell this smell, or I see in the store, I automatically think about my mom. And I think the same way, photography can be experienced as almost like a visceral reaction that comes as a response to like particularly wrenching or exhilarating image, or just daily objects sometimes. And just like the smell or looking at this perfume reminds me of my childhood and my mother. So those daily objects can really remind people of their own life and personal experiences. And so you can see here on this database that I use a teddy bear to represent a child. And the idea was to, instead of showing, 1 in 5 children as just a person, or maybe just a dot on the graph, I used the image of teddy bear falling under the poverty line to embody this child. And everybody can relate to this idea of childhood, because we all had a teddy bear, however form it was. And it's actually literally falling, because that's what's happening, especially right now with COVID. There's more and more children now, where depending on the food provided by school, and with school closed, would tend to not receive the free breakfast and lunches anymore. And finally, among all those photography elements, there's a really powerful one that I think break through the preconception, and also create some kind of compassion and links between the person who look at the database and the person who was at the origin of the data itself. And I bet, I always say that, I always use this thing because it works every time. I bet you're looking at this man hanging from this point, because it's a powerful human reflex. You cannot help, and it's been proven by science, to look at people's faces or human figures in general. And it's a technique that's used in marketing very regularly, but I haven't seen it used so much in the realm of data visualization. So I decided to use portraits as part of my visual exploration to add like a whole nother layer of reality, especially when it comes to subjects that actually discuss human subject, like wealth disparity is the specific case. To me, it's really important to expose the faces of the people that we talk about. It creates a human connection between the people from the data to the people looking at the data. And also, instead of blending those individual and a statistic, to me, it's important to remind of the reader and to use specific people. And in that specific case, I wanted to show the wealth disparity between Black people and white people in America. And you can see how the disparity is pretty much the same in 2016 and in 2019. And highlighting this Black person allows me to remind people of, maybe someone that they know, maybe your cashier in the store, maybe your sister, maybe an aunt, maybe a cousin, or, maybe, I don't know, Karen on the payroll. But the idea is to incite them to pay more attention to the numbers and in a more personal way. And it seems relevant to really personify those data, especially when it comes to those minorities or ethnicities that are misrepresented or underrepresented in the media in general. And more than just using portraits, sometimes I want to use emotional portrait. And I'm going to put a warning here. I'm trying also to not be exploitative with the photography I use, because it's hard to find. I don't want to, when we talk about death, for instance, I don't want to show death. And I think we need to be aware of, with all those videos, for instance, of police violence, I think it's important to remember that we might be traumatizing a whole generation when we show violence, for instance. So I pay attention to those images. But when it comes to portraits, you can often find portraits that illustrate the emotion you actually want people to feel to. And here I use, so it's the depression symptom prevalence before pandemic and during the pandemic. And as you can see, it has increased overall. More people feel, depression symptoms overall. And I wanted to also specifically, again, show those minorities, because those are the ones more impacted. And we know they're also the ones more impacted mentally. So it was important for me to display all this type of skin color and ethnicity, because it impacts everyone, but specifically those people. So that's a bit like some techniques to use in general that I use personally. And, and someone asked me recently if artistic data visualization influences or biases the user, or is it, beneficial for the user to understand and memorize the information? And I don't really have an answer for it, to be fair. I think it's both. I think, of course, I try to influence the reader, because despite the data being neutral, however you want to call it, I don't think it is. I think we're talking about people. I think there's clear right now, we can see that it has an impact. The data visualization that you're showing has an impact on people, and where it was collected had an impact too. And so I think there's like this place right now where if beauty and art are known to be very personal, we're also learning that data is also personal. And actually that's the title of a research paper from Evan Peck, and I really advise every one of you to go read it, because it's very interesting, and it explains how like everyone kind of relates to data visualization in a very different way and a very personal way. So I think today the person that I received information is sometimes very far away from the people whose stories are being told, and I don't know, it's just an exploration. I want to try to bridge that gap, and I want to encourage everyone to somehow take advantage of this amazing knowledge and this position that we have of having this knowledge, and try to raise awareness on subject that maybe matters to us, or at least to you, or maybe someone of your family or someone you know. And maybe try something different, to be honest. I don't know if I don't have the answer. That's just the way I do things. But I would really encourage everyone to just try their own style, try their own signature, and try your own media, because it doesn't have to be visual either. Maybe it's, sound, maybe it's structural. And that's it for today. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle. It's really very inspiring talk and examples, and you really have a very delicate touch in handling difficult topics like this. So really very nice. Sonja, do you want to have the stage?
So no questions at Gabrielle at this point.
Let me see. Yeah, maybe. There is a question for you, Gabrielle, actually. Maybe you can answer it. How are you dealing with the copyrights, rights of use of the images?
So it's a great question because it's really hard. I use a lot of Unsplash photos, which are free copyrights and free to use. So I encourage everyone to use them. And it's great because it leads you to great portfolios of photographers. I also use stock pictures, but very little for two reasons. Not that I don't want to pay for it, but because often they're very staged images that don't really fit my story. As I was telling, I try to find more emotional and more normal people, daily life people. And often the stage aspect of the stock pictures don't really fit that aspect. And the second reason is that often I cannot find the people that I'm trying to illustrate, meaning colored people, Hispanic people, Native Americans. And I have actually a resource, if you want, I'll share it. But I have created this Google Sheet that kind of gathers a bunch of resources, photography, stock pictures, but also other illustration vectors, for instance, that are made to display more ethnicities in stock illustration photos. So if you want to use that also, you have to pay for it, but most of them are not free, but they're available. And they allow you to have a bigger range of images that you usually don't see, because unfortunately, stock pictures are also biased.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, don't hesitate to share this service.
Okay, I'll go look for it at the end.
Oh yeah, so we actually have a lot of questions for you, Gabrielle.
Okay.
I don't know if we should answer them now or keep them for the end so that we can have maybe both of you.
Keep them for the end maybe, and then that way Sonja can also answer some of it. I'm sure they'll overlap.
There is maybe just one question about the title and author of the data research paper you mentioned. I think data is personal.
Yeah, it's Evan Pick, I think. So I'll put the link in the chat while Sonja is talking.
Thank you very much.
So, I'll take the floor then.
Please.
I'm going to share my screen now. Zürich, where is it? No, that's not it. Where is it? Wait a minute. It's over here.
In the meantime, do you want Gabrielle to answer a question just for you?
Oh, no, it's here. I'm
here.
She got it. You see it?
There you go. It works. Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Perfect. We see it now.
So yes, ever since I got asked to give a talk here, I have this song in my head, and it's a song from 1969. I'm a bit older than Gabby, but not from the 60s. But eventually, there's this song in my head, and it's called Sympathy, and it's the lyrics are like, and sympathy is what we need, my friend. And it got me thinking, because I couldn't. There's always songs in my head, but there isn't one with empathy. But then I thought, well, what's the difference between sympathy and empathy? And I researched a bit, and we're talking about empathy today, but there's often confusion, and I felt confused myself as well. So sympathy is feeling for, that's having feelings of pity or sorrow for someone else's misfortune. Wrong mouse. Sympathy is more of a judgmental nature, and trying to help people with saying, you worry too much, you have a bath, take a deep breath, and so on. And it's most because people do this because they are feeling powerless, and the inability to truly take pause. And empathy is feeling with. So it's the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It's more like saying, I hear you, I see you, you have maybe experienced the same troubles, and you are able to connect and let the other person know you are and will be there. And you do not have to come up with a hollow solution like mostly with just the sympathy thing. And I think sympathy is what we can achieve rather quickly with data visualization, but it's very hard to create it with empathy. And even more, I think in this time, in this age, where we are all overwhelmed and fed by populist messaging, and it's a real challenge to get people to care about one another at that level. So having said that, I'm Sonja Kuijpers. I'm a studio therapist, working under the name Studio Therapy. And I design projects for clients, and I also create visualizations out of personal interest. And I'm happy to have been invited to assist Gabrielle and give a small talk. And I'm sharing you my story today, and I hope I will be able to give you some inspiration and new insights to share your own empathic stories and physics. Well, this is a small grab of my projects that I've done before, and maybe you recognize some. I hope you do. What I really like doing is taking a graph a bit further. So I experiment with forms and shapes, and I try to bring novelty into it. And aesthetics is always something I like adding to it. This is how I often start. I'm not like Stephanie Pasavic and Georgia and all these people who create these beautiful drawings. It's a total mess with me, but this is how I start, and I look for ideas very small that might fit the data. And then I take it to the next level. I go search in Excel for what kind of graph would fit the data, and look for the outliers. And I start graphs in Excel and export them to Illustrator to edit them. But I also use RAW. I hope some of you might know that that app. And then I experiment a bit, and then I also take it to Illustrator, and then I work the whole thing out. So, and then mostly for clients, I show them one or two setups, and from that I work on. So I'm going to start with a very light subject. Maybe some of you already know it. It's keuzestress. And keuzestress is the word in Dutch when you get stressed out about the choices you have to make. And this one is about my search for the correct mascara. And well, I'm obviously not a fashionata. I'm not very aware of trends, and I don't know what to wear to feel should be to be hip. But I do a little makeup, and I have to buy new ones once in a while. And then I go shopping, and I see this, and I'm totally overwhelmed. I don't know which way to go, what to buy, and I'm totally into this bubble of frustration and overwhelm. And then I thought, well, what to do next? I want to find one that fits my needs. So here's what I did. I scraped a website with the data on all the mascaras that shop sold. And I did have some requirements for the mascara I needed, because I can have very nasty hay fever, and it got me sneezing and teary eyes. And so I had to find a waterproof for sensitive eyes, just a regular black. But there seems to be, there is no regular black. Some are named regular black, but then still it has another name to it. So I took the characteristics of the mascara, like lengthen, adding curl, the waterproof characteristic, and I designed a figure that sort of a symbol that eventually I didn't aim for it to look like an eye, but that is what came out, and it seemed very appropriate for the thing I was creating. So I created the templates, and then I created all the 390 blacks that I found, and I arranged them by their blackness. So you can see there's a regular black, and there is a maximum black, full black. That's how I arranged them. And for the ones that were looking for a more a better overview, I arranged this one, and from here on, I could see which one I needed, because then I created this. I sought for what did I need. I wanted to add length. I had to buy one for sensitive eyes, and so eventually I found the one I could buy. So the takeaway from this is, well, if you feel overwhelmed or frustrated, you can use your skills to create an overview. And well, it appeared that I'm not the only one experiencing this overwhelm and frustration, because most of the reactions from other women were, I have the exact same feelings. And now I'm not saying brands should make their product range smaller. Well, in my case, I would really appreciate it, because it would make my choices easier. But it's more in the recognition with others, the same overwhelm, the same frustration, and even more so the acknowledgement that I think there lie chances to connect with each other through these types of data viz. Now, back for the empathy bit. Can you aim for it? Can you create data vizes that you know are going to be empathic? And the first rule in design thinking is you should understand a client's experience and motivations, and you should have a personal understanding of their issues and challenges. That is what empathy means in design thinking. Now, I'm going to take you down a path which is much more serious, because also before this craziness of COVID going on, and all this despair around this event and these days, I was not feeling very well. And so around the turn of 2018-19, I got seriously depressed. So there were patterns and behavior and trauma from my past, as well as things happening in my current life, that triggered me and took me down a really dark hole. And I was so tired, and I wanted out, and I had these thoughts about committing suicide. Now, while I was trying to cope with all these negative emotions, I was also thinking of others, people I knew that committed suicide and or were struggling. And so I looked up the numbers for the Netherlands, and I had this sense I should do something with it, because I wanted to feel more human, connecting with the world again, and showing that these numbers were also people. So I started with a vague idea. I wrote some text and I made some sketches. So this is rather harsh, because I also searched for what kind of images were already there for suicide. And this is not something I got very excited about. And what I did was I approached this project on a rather rational way. I thought of it as a normal project. So I started looking, like Gabby already mentioned, for inspiration in other directions as well. So in illustrations and landscaping. And I used my Pinterest boards for that. I collect all kinds of stuff, mostly data viz, of course, but also landscaping, planning, maps, all sorts of things. And I had this idea of fitting all the suicide methods in one overall visual without pointing out the numbers or even the subject straight away, because I wanted to have an impact and somehow giving room to the lives lost. I started drawing these elements that could be a metaphor for the suicide methods. And I eventually came up with trees for hanging, strangulation, clouds for drugs or medicines, alcohol, people who died of using these medicines. and waves for drowning. And ultimately, it became a landscape. And you can see this tiny sketch in the middle where I thought of how I could start something like this. And yeah, well, when starting a landscape, you have to think about what comes in the front and what comes in the back. And I wanted to layer this information. And well, at the top of this illustration, you see all the, I think it's the trees, all the trees of men committing suicide. And these are the elements that I also put in the landscape eventually, because like I said, I had to put these layers in front of each other. And the landscape for me was the most logical solution, because I wanted the data to be hidden within a peaceful view. That's also because that's how I see a depression. It's often hidden how people feel, especially when they are trying very hard to be nice, to be happy and social, while all the while they are feeling very bad inside. So the outside looks very nice and neat, and the inside is dark. Now, the data I show is all suicides from the Netherlands of the year 2017. And I took the methods and the age groups as the characteristics of the symbols. And I also split the panel in two. So the left you see here are the men, and on the right there are the women. And you can see already there's a lot of trees on the men side and less on the women, and more clouds on the women's side. So you can already see which method gets used the most by which gender. So this is a detail of the total panel, because it's a very, very long image that you scroll along on my website, because that's also a thing I wanted to implement into the emotion of experiencing this image. I want to, how do you say that? Also the scrolling to be part of the feeling of getting to know this landscape. And this is just a piece of it, because I can't show it in one. I think you have to experience it. So you have to take a look at my website to experience it. Now, when I started this project, I didn't immediately think of sharing it, because well, who was my public and who was I trying to reach? And I hesitated a lot, because the taboo around suicide, and I also was a bit afraid that people would be offended or hurt by me because I showed their relatives, someone they knew. And of course, the data was anonymous. It's always anonymous here in the Netherlands, but still, I could imagine someone looking at this landscape and seeing that a cloud was a friend or a brother or sister. And of course, I was afraid I was exposing myself too much. I was already very vulnerable and already down that negative hole. But that's when the anger sort of took over. And with anger, I mean the anger at the system and, well, maybe my past as well. But I decided to share because of my feelings of loneliness, and I was longing for connection. And most of all, the acknowledgement of my feelings and all those other people fighting the same battle. So yes, the empathy goes here. It was me aiming for empathy, not by the design thinking, but for my own needs, because I felt so damn alone. What surprised me was that this fish community, when I shared it, it was a very positive reaction, and I didn't expect it, because my vis looks so much different than the things I already knew and saw online. And I honestly didn't expect for this positive reaction, because, yeah, like I said, it wasn't. In my opinion, it didn't look like all the other vises, and it wasn't how a vis should look like. But eventually, what the greatest part that went on after I published is that I got shortlisted for the Information is Beautiful Awards, and eventually won gold with my project. So you can imagine I was very thrilled on that in that part. What I also got was some reactions from relatives. So the part what I was afraid of that would happen, people thinking it was very, very bad to expose their relatives. But what I got was that they appreciated the way I did it, and that they could see my brother as a tree or my friend was a cloud, and that they appreciated that I handled it this way. And well, you can imagine that brought me to tears again. I'm quickly going through these graphs that I also did. Wait, my laptop is not going. Yeah, the picture takes a long time to load. I also made these graphs because, yeah, well, that's what I do have. And this was also to highlight some things that were in my story beneath the landscape, about which group was which age group was well, the most suicidal. And I also talked about how that was how that came across. So this is one of the tweets I got from sharing my project, and I think this is something that warms my heart, and I think this is what empathy is about at the end. And what I think is we all experience harder times. We lose something, we lose someone, and we get hurt. And I don't think we should hide or be ashamed of these feelings, and that these emotions are relevant too. So some reaction like this is, well, it means the world to me. So now what? As to me, I'm still on meds, and which of course I created a viz on also. This is not up to date, but it's a lot, as you can see. And this is also a thing I did. I'm sort of logging my feelings in the process. So it's, as you can see, it's still very negative, but this is 2019. It's not from this year. I'm still going on with it. I don't have straightforward answers how to design empathic data viz in the end, because I think what I did experience is that sharing hardship, having a way to find acknowledgement either for yourself or for a certain group, like I did. Yeah, well, the start was from a view on despair was myself, of course, but I shared the story of a group. And I think it's in the end, it's about a certain skill, the human skill, and establishing connection through it. This is sort of the end of my presentation. So I would like to motivate you to work that, which can make you feel bad or sad or ashamed or angry, and hopefully we'll be able to connect more.
I think we lost you the last 1 minute, Sonja.
Oh, okay. The last 1 minute, and that's from. Just use this slide. Just this slide.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just the last slide you showed.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said. This is what I'm doing now. I'm still on.
Just
on
the slide with the tools.
Yeah, the last slide.
Okay. Yes, those are the tools I used, and I put some sources in that I used as inspiration for this presentation. And I encourage you to look, to read it, to look at it, and where you can reach out, of course. Just ask me questions, just for work or just for chatting on the subject. And you can find me on different social media. So I want to thank you all for watching this. I'm going to stop
Thank
sharing
you so
now.
much, Sonja. Thank you very much. Extremely inspiring talk, and thank you for sharing so like personal stories also. Yeah, when we were chatting before the meetup, we were worried it would be a bit sad, and you said no, it's hopeful, and I think you're right. It's extremely hopeful. Like data visualization as a coping mechanism, I'm all for it.
Yeah, it is. I think what I also experienced is that it's some sort of meditative, and especially for me, because I'm doing it all in Illustrator, and it's not like regular lines or and I have to put in all manually. So it's not just a goal. It's just working on it is also a part of it.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think you came from the place of your own experience, and I feel also a bit similar, even though obviously it's not so much my experience, but the world I experience. Like I think the emotion that I try to get people to feel is the emotion that I'm feeling when I'm seeing the data. I'm seeing things about climate change, about police brutality, and it makes me mad or sad or happy when it's a happier subject. And I think it's funny how like it comes from you, and then you just want to like share it with other people.
Yeah, like I said, it's about skill. It's about how it affects you or yourself. Yeah.
We have questions, so I will go through them if you're okay. So first question, I think it applies to both of you. Are there any differences when you're provoking positive and negative emotions?
I'm going to look at, are there different ones?
Are there differences when you're provoking positive and negative emotions? I guess like from the people reading your visualizations, maybe the feedback that you get on social media.
Well, I think, but that's I think that's my personal problem. I guess is I always try to find some light message in that's also what I do with negative emotions. I make jokes in between, and I try to lighten up a bit. So, but that's mostly, I think, to make myself feel more comfortable. So, that's also a thing. I think we have to question ourselves. Do we want to make people more comfortable or less comfortable with the message?
Yeah, I agree. And to do that, it's funny for me, it came from criticism. Someone came to me, one of my friends who's homeless actually came to me about one of my homeless dataviz and came at me saying, what's the point of sharing an information and make people feel if there's no action behind? And so I've actually made a purposeful effort recently on my personal project and Instagram mostly to put action steps afterwards. So usually I would add some kind of link to, because I'm not the expert, but there's people that are expert and know what to do to help somehow, whether it's vote, whether it's writing to your governor. So I try to add that too, and it helps with the emotion. And when it comes to positive and negative, the funny part is I look at some research to know, do people relate more to? Because it looked to me that people love this like personal dataviz that I do on my cat, for instance, and Netflix. So, whatever the more funny and lighter things, but it's actually kind of equal. And I look it up to know if people had an easier time to relate to a funny event than a negative one. And it's actually not true. Altogether, people avoid feeling empathy if you ask, like if you're in the research. which is really interesting. So it doesn't matter in a way, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is I think a follow-up question kind of, is empathy necessarily driven by negative emotions? Is it possible to emote with more cheerful works?
No, it's both. I think it's yeah. And I think, I don't know about you, Sonja, but I'm definitely trying to find data that are more uplifting on difficult subject, but uplifting and show solution. But it's, to be fair, it's kind of hard to find. And I don't know if you have seen, but Georgia Lupi actually has a whole series on a pentagram on Instagram about happy news about COVID. And I think because sometimes you have to balance it out. It's a good question.
And it's still it's not. You can have connection with negative experiences, but you can have I think it's great when you can connect about something very positive, because you get to talk to each other. You get to you can share laughs. You can share that's the thing. Sharing these things. Yep.
Nice. There is another question, I think also for both of you, about interactivity. I think someone write that I think that adding layers to the visuals can provide a lot of new opportunities. So, do you also work with interactivity?
So when it comes to me, I'm going to answer first, but then Sonja probably has a different answer. I actually agree in general. I think when we give the average of things, when you show, and it's also in the paper of Evenpeg, but when you show America, people don't care if you show them their own state or their own city, they care. And I think that's what you see in COVID too, for instance, with the data that we get, people only look at the states. And I think when you get the opportunity, interactive if you can, all the way down to individual scale. And I think that's that we all work on. And as I work on that on my professional project, when I get more, when I have the chance to work with a web developer to make things more interactive online, all the way down to individual, if possible, because it's easier to relate to.
I think, like I said, I was a bit stuttering during my presentation. I'm a bit tired, but that's what what do you think about when you say interactivity? Because then it's about clicking or moving or hovering over. Because I think my project is somehow interactive because you have to scroll through it. So you have to do something to look through it, and there are not parts moving around the screen, or you can't click anything, but you have to take part in it to understand what you're looking at. So I'm not negative. I'm not negative about interactivity. I'm just not able to do that myself. So
it requires more technology, so you need help. We don't code, so.
But I think the fact that you have to scroll through your visualization, Sonja, also really adds kind of a physical dimension to it that I think is very nice also. So I agree with you scrolling.
It's funny how I think the idea of putting the individual on this and make a really long scroll instead of just compressing in one single visual is definitely a way to help people see more. I like how important that is, at least in your project. And I had the same thing with my feminicide project, where it's a long scroll of the women that were killed by their partner or ex-partner. And it's also a long scroll and it's on purpose so that people actually see how many. How many is 500, 1,000, 3,000? How many that is?
Oh, okay.
Jack writes in the chat, yes, I also meant the scrolling because exactly as Gabrielle said, empathy needs to see every individual in my point of view. Thank you very much for the question. Another question that we have, what do you think about visualizing phenomena that are not as easily described by quantitative statistical data? For example, experience of an individual or a small group of people that we do not want to put into numbers? That's a hard one.
Yeah, it's a hard one. Because that's what we do, right? We use statistical data. That's what we do with creating DataViz. And of course, you have the self-reporting. Then you have to count for yourself. So I think there are brilliant examples of people doing that, and I really like. It's like because you're kind of taken into their lives and like looking through a window and see what other people are doing and experiencing, and so it's a bit how do you say that in English? Voyeuristic. Yeah. So I think that's a great experience, but I don't know how to do that with a group.
Yeah, I mean there is research paper asking people how they feel about a certain subject. I was thinking the one and obviously those ones are usually polls, so they usually somehow biased, and they don't. And actually, I think it comes with this idea of like showing honesty. When we do DataViz, it's really important to highlight the fact that sometimes it's not an average. It's not, it's not a hard truth, and nothing really is, because if you look at research in general, it's really hard to get the entire view. And if you have a actually global view, you end up doing average, and then you lose the specific of each, maybe groups of individuals. And I think there's also DataViz that can be done by observing qualitative data, which maybe asking people how they feel. And it is done. It's maybe not promoted enough, but it's done, and I actually think it's really interesting and very important.
Yeah, and it stays very difficult. It's very difficult to put people in groups, because how do people identify just by the country they come from, or by their color, or so there are so many backgrounds and things they experience. So it's very difficult to have that quantitative. To quantify it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's necessary somehow to get to ask people how they feel they belong, or breaking down into smaller groups. It's actually something that I think her name is Heather Cross from Data Assist talk about often, how to not be a racist when you do data visualization. And she always say, don't forget to always, and it's something that I try to do too, is try not to find an average, but look at actually the average per subgroup if you can, if there is. And then we get into the whole range of missing data when there's no data about subgroups, and then you're probably missing part of the picture. So it's hard.
I have a question regarding your practice as like a studio, running a studio and doing freelance work. As I guess you sometimes work with clients. How do they react if you talk to them about like adding empathy to your visualizations? Like for instance, like the smoky area chart that you did, Gabrielle. Like, has it happened that sometimes you have like a negative or positive reaction from clients?
I mean, so the thing is, it's a bit different between personal and professional work. And I don't know if you feel the same, Sonja, but it's a bit different. And I always say that. But I try to infuse some of the personal work into the professional work. Professional work, usually they just want to tell a story. And they don't ask themselves, usually there's an end goal of like, we want to inform, and this is a story that we want to say. But I usually try also to tell them, what's your story and what's the emotion you want people to have, if there is one, because sometimes we just use with data that's just purely informative. But if it can be somehow added, I try to to do that. And that's also, it's always the question I ask them, like, how do you want people to feel when they look at your database, and not just what you want people to know.
Very nice.
I can't answer that straight away. My head is like thinking. I'm not, yeah, my clients are not occupied with empathy, I think. They're more like corporate projects. And what I do try to do more often now is think on the clients itself, if they fit into who in my life, in the sense of what is this company in the society, what does this company mean in society, and where do they come from, which country, are human rights even considered there, these sort of things. So that's how I work with clients these days, but I'm not really putting the right questions into place, I think. So maybe that's a thing I can do more often. Yeah.
It depends on the subject, obviously.
Yeah.
You cannot always do that. I have the chance to not work with just corporate, but more like governmental organization or nonprofit that works on more societal subjects. It's easier to, because that's their goal. Their goal is to obviously show some numbers, but also somehow make people feel something and take action.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. There is another question. I would like to know if you ever leverage the DataVis emotions to drive actions, like with the action button library.
Well, within the database, I don't know, but I mean, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier, is that I try to add some kind of an action with the database. If I talk about police brutality, I would add some link on like what you can do against police brutality. I think it's important. And I think it's because it's personal work. I can do whatever I want. You know, like I talk about what I think that matters, and I can put the resources that I think are interesting for people. They can choose not to do anything if they want to, but if it's personal and maybe they react to it and they feel bad about it, but there's option to do something about it, then yeah, we should somehow add something. And it might be sometimes missing. Informing sometimes is not enough.
Yeah, that's. I think that's the start of my the text on my project is a call for action. It's I'm trying to tell people it's not what you see. The people you see are not what they are. They can be depressed and they can have suicidal thoughts. That's what I'm trying to say with my project. And I also, of course, input the message to people having these feelings that they can contact the suicide watches in their countries, and that's the things I did. And what I also did, and that's more of a personal follow-up, is that I'm trying to reach out for institutions that are already into these sort of help. And I'm also trying to put myself more out there in society to have people doing the right thing and to help people out. So yeah, that's my takeaway from my own project. But I encourage people to try to connect. Yeah.
That's very nice. Thank you very much. I think we are actually already out of time, sadly.
We talked too much.
Yeah, because we could.
Yeah, we lost a minute. Sorry.
Not at all. So I think maybe we can wrap up the discussion and continue the discussion on other media like Twitter or Instagram.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you can always reach out.
You can ask me anything. Reach me on different channels, and I'm very open to have discussions, or even people who recognize things in my story. They're more than welcome to contact me.
Okay,
Thank you,
so I still have to thank you very much, both of you, for sharing your experience and also for sharing some technical details. I think it's always very nice to see also the processes and the tools that you use. So thank you very much. And thank you all of you for participating and being so active in the chat. Thank you, Tanya, also for sharing all the links. Don't hesitate to give us feedback to me or Benjamin about the meetup, or about potential topics that you would like to see covered in the next events. So don't hesitate to reach out to me or Benjamin, or on Twitter at DatavisZRH, and also Instagram, same account, DatavisZRH. So thank you very much, Gabrielle. Thank you very much, Sonja, and see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.